rap. We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, everyone. Good to be back with all of you. Another great episode coming to you. Part 3 of our interview with author and coach JP NERBUN. This is the final part of that 3-part interview, and this may be the best of the 3, in my opinion. We're going to dive right in. I hope your year is off to a strong start. Hey, and by being here, your coaching game is definitely going to be off to a stronger start. If you wouldn't mind, leave a review. Take a few minutes. Leave a rating, a review on your podcast platform. That would be huge. I would appreciate that. It's a simple way to give back. Also, head over to 8020baseball.com. Articles, videos, and the drill design guide ready for you. Throw your email in, first name, and it'll come your way immediately. You won't get spammed and bothered, and your email's not going to be shared with anybody. I take care of all that stuff myself on the back end. So please, take a few minutes, leave a quick review or just a rating. That'd be great, especially if you're getting a lot out of this. I don't run ads. I don't plug products. Just trying to give back and help the youth baseball community, making it a better place for everybody. And get that drill design guide. This is the perfect time to read that 21-page PDF that breaks down the 8 parts needed to go into making very successful drills. So with that said, let's dive into part 3 of the interview. I appreciate your time, JP. And I know you're traveling. You're actually out working with coaches. You're probably going out later today to work with coaches. And so I appreciate you taking the time while you're traveling to be on here to provide this support. So thank you. With that said, let's move into the next question because I know you're a busy person. So in what ways are parents harming youth sports, and how can coaches help address these problems proactively? What's something you see, a couple ways or one way that you see parents harming youth sports? And then more specifically, how can coaches help to proactively address those things?
Yeah, probably when it comes to youth sports is they're driving coaches out of the profession. Like, we don't want to coach anymore because we don't want to deal with parents, the parent complaints. You know, I talk about that a little bit in the culture system at the end, and also obviously in the sports parent solution where, I've gotten drunken voicemails. I've gotten nasty emails. I had a parent almost run me off the road in their car once because they wanted to talk to me as I was leaving. I mean, it's just kind of crazy, the stories that you can see there. I think one of the ways they're harming youth sports is the way that they come at coaches. And I'm really happy to see a shift in the last, 20, 30 years of coaching where some power has come back to the players, right? Like, I think there's an age and an era of coaching where the coaches had all the power. We saw a lot of transactional coaching, the Bobby Knight type of coaching. That's just not healthy. It's not beneficial. It's harmful for our young people. And so I think coaches are being held accountable to their behaviors. And there's a lot of coaches that need to be held accountable. But there's also parents that are weaponizing that against the coaches, where they will accuse a coach of harming their children's mental health because they dropped them in the lineup or they're not playing them. And it's like, well, no, like, it's up for us as coaches and for you as parents to help your athlete work through that adversity. But to accuse a coach of just because they didn't play them, that's harming their mental health, but they're weaponizing some of this type of language around mental health against coaches. We see that. We're seeing a lot of false accusations against coaches and their behavior. We're seeing parents in the stands, whatever. They're not great, obviously, with referees, neither are some coaches, when it comes to referees, but they're stirring up the pot. They're going to other parents and they're talking badly about the coach. The kid gets into the car and they talk badly about your coach, right? And when you create this victim mentality in the athlete, and so I think what we're seeing with parents today is that not all of them, but there's a group of them, and they end up tainting the water. And so we are just like, coaches don't want to mess with parents because we don't want to deal with that because we've been burned. That's really hard because the majority of parents are good people. They're well-intentioned. Parenting is our hardest job. Parenting an athlete is really hard in today's culture because it's really visible with social media, and there's a lot more pressure to make this team, to get this scholarship. There's just so much more riding on the line today, I feel like, in athletics, and they're investing more money into the travel baseball. And so all of a sudden, like, they feel like they should have more of a voice. And I think they should have a bit more of a voice than probably that they did 20 years ago, but that doesn't give them the right to blast coaches on social media, to send them nasty emails, to expect and demand their time on Thanksgiving weekend or whatever it is. Like this type of behavior is really problematic in the culture, and it doesn't help model healthy respect towards the adult and the leader for their young people, for sure. So I'll just pause there because I know you want to talk about solutions, but that's kind of like the biggest problem I think we're seeing.
We just were discussing it briefly in that chapter towards the end of your book. The culture system is, I think the first thing we can do as coaches is to, we want to be all inclusive, and we want to have, we want to give everybody a chance. And I say this, I say, by saying no to one family because you know that they've shown issues and problems in the past, or there's some red flags that you think they're going to, ruin the culture. You're saying no to one, but you're saying yes to the other 11, 12, 25, 50 people on the team. So I think we have to look at it that way. And it's not that you're saying no to somebody, it's that you're saying yes to all the others because you want that culture to be awesome or in a great team culture, not something that's being dissolved or eroded away or collapses because of one or two bad apples or characters, especially parents. I heard a college coach recently say, and I've heard this before, but this was a pretty prominent one. They're like, we're recruiting the parents now. We're recruiting the parents just as much as the players. And I think you go, well, that Coach Bo, that's college. We're coaching 9U baseball or 10-year-old baseball. It's the same. In fact, it's probably even worse because the parents that get to college, the parents of college athletes maybe have worked through and figured some paths out and they've gotten better at certain things. They've developed different avenues and outlets. They're not new to the game. Just like a college coach is most likely going to be a better coach than your average youth coach. I think the same with the parents. But I like how you talk about giving. The problem with the parents is it comes up and these things that bubble and these, how do we proactively help it? And I think we have to replace, and this goes back to what you talked about with having open-ended conversations, being upfront, being transparent, making sure it's a good fit for both sides. We hear talk about replacing a bad habit with a good habit, not just eliminating a bad habit, but switching it with a better habit. And late night drinking with waking up early in the morning and working out. That'd be an example. I think with parents, they don't know there's another path. They just think when you get in the car, you just badmouth the coach or you question the coach when you get in the car on the ride home because that's how their parents did it. Or that's just the first thing that kind of comes to mind. Maybe sending an email to the parents for youth sports. I'm just kind of got me thinking here. You can give me your thoughts, JP, is sending an email and say, hey, here's a good conversation starter. Here are a couple of things that really can help on the drive home. Maybe you share your thoughts on that take.
Yeah. I mean, there's just kind of two things, like just to your earlier point, like we have to, as club administrators, academies, whatever, athletic directors, even just leaders around the team, we have to be really clear about, hey, this is what we're about. You pay money, right? This is the experience. This is what you're paying for. We're going to work with you. We're going to partner with you. We're about your kids' development. We're going to have conversation on these. But these are also the things that we're not going to tolerate or allow. If you want to be able to call a coach at every hour, then go find a different club, like those types of things. So we have to be really clear on those boundaries right off the bat. When it comes to this educating parents about how to be better sports parents, it's kind of tricky because we don't want to come across as lecturing them. But I've had coaches that I work with, that young coach I mentioned earlier, he just shared in a pre-season meeting with the parents, just a video and a few thoughts on just how to best support their kids through the adversity and struggles. And it was really profound because a dad emailed him after and said, hey, that was really impactful. It really got me to think about how I can use sports to help grow my relationship with my son. Whereas right now it's probably creating more conflict for us. Do you have any more resources you can send me? And this coach that was speaking that he's not even a parent. So it was kind of cool. It was really interesting. I was down in New Orleans here. I was speaking at a high school just outside New Orleans. And I was giving a parent workshop yesterday to a load of parents at this high school. And we were talking about healthy sports parenting. Obviously I'm not the coach, so they're a little bit more receptive. And I got this kind of expertise, I guess you call it, and background and research I can share with them around some tips for healthy sports parenting. But the thing that was probably the most impactful that I did was I just said to the parents, I said, hey, we want this to be a great experience for our boys here. We want to support them. What are 3 things that you guys can do as parents to help make this a great experience for the team and for the other parents of the program, not just for the players? And I had them in tables. of 6 to 7 or 8. And the parents put on a note card, 3 things they shared. And there was a lot of things around staying positive, encouraging, not criticizing the referees, supporting all team members. And one thing I love that this one dad threw out, suggested, and if they all agreed to it in the room, that was really good, was after the game, parents should go up to the other kids, at least to one other kid, not just their own kid, and just point out one thing they thought that kid did well. And everyone's head was nodding. And so these are the parents are coming up with parent standards for how we want to be as a parent group. Actually, after this today, I'm going to type those up. I'll send them to the coach. And that coach is just going to email them to all the parents. And every email, every weekly, just a reminder, here's our parent standards. It's really powerful when we co-create with parents because they can hold each other accountable. So those are just some cool ways to maybe approach it.
I love your approach. Let's co-create. Let's co-create, not dictate. And if anything, that's just a good operating system. Again, another term. I use the word operating system over the years on this podcast, and I've heard you use it a couple times, 3 or 4 times already in your book. And operating systems are a good way to go about it because you know what? Not always going to have a tool for everything that comes up or each specific set of parents or parent or athlete, but having this overarching operating system like, hey, if in doubt, don't dictate, just co-create, work together. Let's get to the next one here, JP. The next question. I know you're busy and you've been giving us a ton of time, and we're actually going more than a little over what I was hoping to take from your time because I know you're out there working with programs, working with teams. Let's dive into the next question. What are the top 2 things coaches can do to foster a collaborative partnership with parents? What are a couple of the top things coaches can do to foster a collaborative partnership with parents?
Yeah, I think outside of sharing your philosophy, like I talked about earlier, I think every coach needs to come up with the conversations that you want to have with parents. For me, those conversations are when something's going on with your child that you're observing, they're really down, they're not enjoying the sport, let me know. When something's going on at home, that it would be helpful for me to be aware of, somebody sick or something like that, just some family situations that can help me to be more supportive of the child through that experience. If I do something in my behavior as a coach that it changes your opinion of me as a person. You can think I'm a bad coach, but if you go, man, he's a bad person, doesn't care about my kids. I want to know about that. Just if something is really bothering you for a long period of time, I want to hear about it because I'd rather we work it out than you go in the stands or you talk to your kid about it. Like those are the conversations I want to have. They may not be the conversations you as a listener want to have, but you need to know what those conversations are and just communicate, hey, this is the conversations I want to have. This is powerful. And just saying, oh, yeah, he does care about my kid and he does want to work together. And you obviously can communicate the conversations you won't have, like I mentioned earlier. The second thing I would recommend, there are a lot of cool team activities that you can do with parents, and I talk about in the book, but the most profound thing is every time you have a conversation with an athlete, we talked a lot about conversations earlier, so hopefully you're going to be having even more conversations after today. But every time you have a conversation with an athlete, take the time to text that parent, to email that parent, to call that parent, or you just see them picking their kid up and just say, hey, thank you for allowing me to coach your son or your daughter. I really enjoy this about them, or I really appreciate this. So just taking time on all those conversations you have to let their parents know, like they mean so much to them. Anytime a teacher or a coach has told us about our kids and what they like about them, we know we like hang on that all day, all week. And so that's a powerful follow-up. It's just these check-ins. And also if you're just having a struggle with a child, right? Or struggling here with this, or we have to have this discipline issue and he's going to have to sit out here. We're dealing with it, but we just want to let you know what's going on. And maybe there's some insights you can give us there. You try to have more of the positive follow-ups and check-ins. But when you start doing that, you can also have those other check-ins, which is like, hey, we're struggling with this. You got any insight on this? Or we just want to let you know, beware of this. Like if you're seeing him on the bench and he's not playing tomorrow, this is the reason why, right? And so often we allow the athlete to tell the narrative or the story about the situation. And it's not really the full story or true story. And so the more we can be checking in with parents positively and through some of the conflict, the better.
Love your message to coaches of using a method or taking the path of encouraging parents to communicate, making it easy, being upfront with them to encourage them to communicate the things that you as a coach should or need to know to best help support their kid. Right away, it sends a message of caring. And 2, on the back end, which is just as important, it gives you the information. It gives you the information as a coach that you need to be a better coach for that particular player, to help support them. The message that you're sharing with coaches is be proactive, really encourage parents to share and proactively share out the information. And I think that's good for getting our players too, to kind of proactively communicate information about their life, things that are going on that can help us better serve them. And I like your tip of a follow-up text or a letter or an email thanking them, having the opportunity to coach their kid. Love that. Okay. How can coaches effectively enforce healthy boundaries with parents?
Yeah. So like we said a little bit earlier on, these are some conversations we're not going to have, or we're going to have 24 hours. I like to say I need 24 hours because I myself might be hot after a game. I myself might be frustrated. So those are some important things. I think the other thing I would recommend is that we got to lean in to be able to sometimes have some hard conversations. And really a lot of the same tools applies that we talked about earlier. First off, before you have these hard conversations, there's a much better chance they're going to go well if you've done some things proactively to build that relationship, that connection with the parent and the partnership. So all the things we talk about there, the things I talk about in my book, ways to engage. Now there's a moment where, let's say you hear there's some grumblings, the parent's really unhappy, or maybe you see their behavior at a game, or maybe they send you an appropriate message on email. I had a coach who was at a fundraiser the other day, and a parent came up to him, had a few drinks, and he starts giving him an earful around, different things and asking kind of inappropriate questions around what's his role going to be and how many minutes he like, just things like that. And in all those situations, it's best to give it some time, give it a day or two, or for at least a few hours. And then just say, hey, I'd like to meet with you to share some concerns. And then just lean in and just say, share your observations. I noticed at the games, I'm seeing this a lot. Or I've been hearing, and I could be wrong, but I'm hearing that you're really, really upset and frustrated with my coaching. Or, hey, at that fundraiser the other day, you came up, you shared some things with me, and we're talking about some things. And, my observation is my feeling was I was crossing some lines that we kind of sat here. Once again, we're just sharing our observations. We're sharing them lightly. Hey, this is what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? What do you think about that? And when we've done that, there's some really powerful stories. One I love is a coach that had to have a hard conversation with a parent, and it was around the parents in a really negative email, like 2 a.m. Coach sits down with them, and the coach is not even finished with his sentence of like, I'm seeing this. And the mother's just like, I'm sorry. I totally crossed the line. I totally screwed up. I'm so embarrassed. And even at that point of that coach that was talked by that dad of that fundraiser, same thing. I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed. That was totally inappropriate, right? So we're enforcing the boundaries. And so often if we've done the work on the front end to build a relationship, when we share what we've seen, right, the parent will be receptive to that. And we'll go back and they'll focus on doing their job. Obviously, not every story is going to be perfect like that. And that's where we need to be really working with our administrators to say, hey, when we see these types of behaviors, this is what way we're going to approach them. I had an athletic director I work with, and he had parents sent a really nasty email to a coach. And that athletic director stepped in, intervened, and said, listen, you're no longer allowed to attend games for the rest of the season. It was that harsh and that critical, and the parent had been warned before. And we're no longer having a conversation. We'll reevaluate things next year when your son comes up in senior next year. We'll reevaluate. And that became the standard. It's just seeing strength from administrators. That's really important as well, too.
Makes me think of something that coaches could do at the youth level is, I have coaches reach out that are actually on the board of their local Little League, youth sports organization. But maybe that's something that should be discussed, and there should be a template, a blueprint for how can coaches handle a situation that's not working out, or parents that, is there a way that the league has in writing, maybe go to another team or maybe give the coach a little recourse? Of course, this is the last thing we want. This is the ultimate consequence, removing a player from your team, because then you can't serve and change their life if they're not there.
I would say this real quick, coaches, that because this is really important. We never want the kid to suffer because of the parent's behavior. But when we communicate, this is the consequence. Hey, if you choose to continue to act in this way, then you're choosing to a different program. And so it's the parent's behavior is choosing to remove their child from the situation, because we as administrators and coaches, we have a responsibility and duty to create an environment that's safe, healthy, and positive for everyone. And so if you have a really nastiness coming out of some certain parents in the stands or the way they're acting, we have a duty and a responsibility to the program, to the club, to the team. And so we must step in there to protect that environment.
100%. But we're also sending the message to that kid that type of parenting, that way to handle things is not acceptable or not appropriate, and it's not the best way. So in other words, if we allow it and these kids see their parents get away with these tactics, then what do we expect for them to think when they get older? Well, it worked for my parents. They were able to bully and do this to my coach. I'm not saying all kids are going to grow up and do that, but when they see it and they see it not being, the consequences aren't there. And in fact, it's just allowed. That's sending a bad message. So that's one way of looking at it too. And of course, removing a kid from the team, like I was saying, it is the last resort. But I always say this, coaches, either you're going to have one kid suffer or you're going to have a dozen kids on a youth baseball team suffer. If you say yes to that kid, then you're saying no to all your other kids. As we wrap up, JP, thank you so much for all this time. And I want you to share out again real quick. There's a couple things that you didn't even share with the audience because I think you're being humble. Let them know the name of your podcast and how they can sign up. You got a newsletter I signed up for, and I've been getting an email from you. And I know it's probably automated, but I know you're putting it together and it's full of good stuff. So I'm going to have you hit on those two things in a second. But you did a podcast interview with Annie Duke. I read Annie Duke's first book years ago about playing the percentages. And anybody familiar with Annie Duke, probably the most famous women's poker player of all time. And so you interviewed Annie Duke on your podcast. And this goes, I'm going to tie this in here. So you said not every story ends great. Not every situation is going to end perfect. Not every strategy we use as coaches is going to come to fruition. It's not going to manifest in this amazing way and we're going to solve every problem. But that approach to anything in life is a fool's errand, in my opinion. And it goes right along the lines with what Annie Duke preaches and discusses is that decision-making is not about the perfect option. It's about making the highest percentage option. I think that's something to take away as coaches. We're not going to be perfect. And in life, we're not going to be perfect. We're just trying to figure out what are the higher percentage options? What are the big percentage options that will give us a chance at being more successful? JP, if you could share out maybe the name of your podcast and then how they can sign up for that newsletter, that'd be great.
Yeah. So my podcast is the Coaching Culture Podcast, and we're going on over 6 years now, almost 400 episodes. We don't really interview too many coaches. It's mostly really focusing on people like Annie Duke that have a specialty in understanding so many things around culture and leadership, the research around behavior change, scientists, things like that. But it's all around sports culture, and how we as a leader can influence it and put, like you said, the odds more in our favor, get more upstream. We don't have 100% control. I always talk to coaches about this. The question I'll often ask is, what can you do to create the conditions for good things to happen? What can you do to create the conditions for good things to happen? You don't have 100% control over the situation, but you do have influence. And we want to have good things happen in our program. And so, you could check out Coaching Culture Podcast. And then the newsletter, you can sign up at tocculture.com. It's a weekly newsletter, articles, tells you a lot more about our services. I do one-on-one coaching with coaches. And like I said earlier, I'm a certified leadership coach. I also do some consulting to work with people on implementing some of these systems and strategies to improve their culture. And we got some online courses, and then I do some speaking as well to coaches and to parents and facilitation with teams.
So I'll say this to the listeners, highly recommend just right now, go sign up for that newsletter. I've been getting it myself to my inbox and it's really good. And I'll tell you what, I sign up for newsletters probably once a month. I'll sign up for one. And usually I got about a 75% rate of after 2 or 3, I'm going, it's just not really resonating and it's not worth my time, a busy schedule. But yours is, I found yours to be worth the time to read. And in other words, I'm getting more out of it than the time it takes to read it and then the links and the resources that you add to it. JP, obviously an expert in this area of team culture. And JP, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. Do you have any final thoughts? I'll let you finish it up.
Yeah. I really value coaches. I hope all my listeners can sense that. I try to hold myself to a really high standard and as a leader, and I think that's what we're all trying to do. And so my work, my books, all those things that I'm offering, they're for coaches. It's to really try to go beyond just theory and say, okay, this is what it actually looks like. And this is how I can apply it in my context. Every coach has to do their own work to see what that looks like in their context. But I'm trying to give some simpler to use, more practical tools. And so I hope people will check out the work and use that to work on themselves as leaders. And the beautiful thing is, in this journey or leadership, you grow as a coach, you're actually growing as a person. To become a better coach, you got to become a better person. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. And it's been so influential, this journey in my life. It's made me a better dad, better husband. So yeah, please check out my work and keep working on yourselves, coaches.
Well, it's a win-win-win all across the board. Hey, well, I'll throw this out there. You should, JP, and listeners, I know some of you have influence on your league. Talk to your league and say, can we get JP? Can we hire JP? And again, I'm not making any money off this. I'm just saying this is what I think would be a good move. Talk to your league and say, hey, can we, as a league, get JP either on a Zoom call or to come work with us, depending on how it works out, and work with all the coaches. And so that's something I would just throw that out just off the cuff. I just think would be a great idea for you coaches. Go to your league and say, hey, how about this for everybody? What if we brought this in? My dad used to be on the board of a little league, and he would bring in experts that worked on coaching strategies and things, but never team culture. And this is the most important topic. It wasn't as prevalent in the 80s, this kind of idea of team culture and stuff. So definitely recommend that. And thank you, JP, for all your time. Appreciate it. Hopefully we can have you back on in the future. In the meantime, our listeners have a lot of great resources to go learn more from you and get the books and reach out and contact you.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you, JP. All right. That's going to wrap up our interview. Very thankful to Coach JP NERBUN to come on here all the way from Ireland. Well, technically he recorded it from New Orleans because he was out there helping some teams in New Orleans, making his rounds around the country, but he's based out of Ireland. Recommend checking out his stuff, getting that newsletter, reading at least one of his books, if not all three. We'll have a few interviews coming up before the springtime. We'll dive back into our normal format. Got some really great tips coming your way over the next month as we start to rock and roll with the upcoming season in the not too distant future. Thank you all for being here. Take those few minutes, go leave a review, a quick rating for the podcast. That would be much appreciated. And go grab that free drill design guide at 8020baseball.com. And until next week, let's take care of our health, our families, our close friends, and let's keep making the youth baseball community a much better place. Thank you for being a coach. You should be proud of yourself for directly giving back to your community, to society. Being a coach is something to be very proud of. And you should also be proud of yourself for being here each week, trying to get better in an efficient and an effective way. Look forward to coming back next week, next Tuesday, when the next episode comes out on the 80/20 Baseball podcast, the 80/20 Baseball Masterclass, where we focus on mastering the key parts of youth coaching. Until then, adios.
This has been the 80/20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.